There exists a certain kind of creature in the world. A few people have claimed to have seen them, but their existence has never been confirmed. We refer to these mysterious beings as Unidentified Mysterious Animals, UMA. Hello everyone! Welcome to the World in 10 Minutes series. Brazil is the largest country in Latin America, occupying nearly half of South America's total land area. Its complex historical background, the influence of multi-ethnic immigration, and the integration of indigenous Indian cultures have shaped Brazil into a unique country, one that centers around Portuguese culture while embracing diverse ethnic characteristics. At the same time, the Amazon River, which flows through the northwest of Brazil, has provided the country with abundant natural resources. Within the highly biodiverse rainforest, there have been reported sightings of creatures beyond human understanding. These mysterious encounters have added a legendary aura to this deep and enigmatic green wilderness. In this episode, I'll be sharing with you a legendary creature born from this very backdrop. A giant worm-like monster from Brazilian folklore, Minhocão. The Minhocão is typically described as an enormous worm-like creature covered in hard black scales. It has an upturned snout, similar to that of a pig, and two flexible antennae on its head. Its reported length ranges from 65 to 260 feet, though such variations in size could be due to exaggeration in folklore or simple visual misperceptions. According to legends, the Minhocão lurks in swampy areas of the rainforest, ambushing livestock such as cattle and horses, dragging them into the water and devouring them. It is said to tunnel through the earth, creating massive underground passageways. These tunnels are said to be so large that they can alter the course of rivers or destroy entire orchards. Its occasional roars can be heard from miles away. Some accounts describe the Minhocão as a giant fish or serpent instead. This legend is widespread across multiple Latin American countries, including Brazil, Uruguay, Nicaragua, and Paraguay. In 1847, the French naturalist Auguste Saint-Hilaire published a paper in the Annals of Natural History and a magazine article titled The Minhocão of the Guianan People. He suggested that Minhocão might be derived from the word minhoca, which translates to earthworm in Portuguese. According to his research, local guides told him that this creature inhabited Lake Paranaíba and Lake Feia in Goiás, Brazil. It resembled an enormous earthworm but was much larger, and unlike regular worms, its mouth was massive and clearly visible. It rarely surfaced, but when hunting, it would suddenly break through the water's surface, tear into the belly of its prey, and drag them to the depths. One of the earliest scholars to study the Minhocão was the German biologist Fritz Müller. He immigrated to Santa Catarina, Brazil, in 1852 and became both a doctor and a biologist. While conducting amateur research on crustaceans, he stumbled upon the local legend of a giant worm-like creature. According to the folklore, this mysterious beast could reach 50 yards in length and 5 yards in width. Its entire body was covered in armored scales, and it was so powerful that it could uproot massive pine trees with ease. The tunnels it dug changed the course of rivers, turning dry land into bottomless swamps. Gradually, as more eyewitness accounts surfaced, people began to realize that the Minhocão was not just a legend. In 1877, Dr. Müller published an article in Germany's Zoo Series journal, introducing the information and data he had collected about the Minhocão. However, since the available German translation software at the time was not very accurate, much of the content remained unclear. In February 1878, the British Natural Science Journal published a summary of Müller's article titled The New Underground Monster. This became one of the key references for sharing the Minhocão's recorded history. Dr. Müller's article mentions an event that occurred about 8 years earlier, in 1869. A man named Francisco Valere reportedly saw a massive creature lying on the banks of the Cavias River, about 10 kilometers from the town of Lages, Brazil. According to Valere, the creature had a thick body nearly 3 feet wide but was not very long. It had a pig-like snout, and he couldn't determine whether it had any limbs. Fearing the beast, Valerie didn't dare approach it alone. However, by the time he returned with his neighbors to investigate, the creature had disappeared. Yet, it left behind a trench-like track in the ground. 1 week later, about 6 kilometers away in another direction, similar tracks were discovered. These deep grooves extended all the way to the roots of a massive pine tree, leading into an even deeper, swampy area. During the 1870s, an engineer named Odebrecht was surveying a highway project from Itajaí to Santa Catarina. While mapping the route near the Marombas River floodplain, he discovered a series of winding, deep trenches. These tunnels were so complex that anyone wandering inside could easily get lost. At the time, he couldn't explain the origin of these strange formations. However, in hindsight, he believed they were created by the massive and mysterious Minhoco. According to a report published about 14 years earlier, in January 1864, a resident named Antonio Branco was traveling near the Cachorros River when he discovered that the road had been completely destroyed. Large piles of overturned earth covered the path, forming a network of deep, winding trenches. The trenches stretched for about 700 to 1,000 meters, beginning at a small stream and ending in a swamp. From that moment on, the stream's water began flowing through these new trenches. Eyewitnesses, including Branco and his son, reported that hundreds of people from nearby areas came to examine the tracks left behind by the Minhoco. Several pine trees had been completely uprooted along the path. One particular tree had its bark and trunk shredded into pieces, as if something immensely powerful had torn it apart. One night in 1849, near the Papagaio River in Paraná, Brazil, a local resident named João dos Santos heard a torrential downpour outside his house. However, when he looked up, he was shocked to see that the sky was clear and filled with stars. The next morning, the locals discovered that a vast section of land on the other side of the nearby hill had been devastated. Deep trenches covered the entire area, stretching from the Lajeado Plain all the way to the Papagaio River. 3 years later, in 1852, a woman named Labino Santos visited the area and found that these trenches and mounds of earth were still visible. After careful examination, she concluded that the tunnels must have been dug by two massive creatures, each trench measuring about 2 to 3 meters wide. Labino later shared her findings with Dr. Muller, further fueling scientific curiosity about the Minhoco. In the same region, many people have claimed to witness the Minhoco over the years. One such account comes from a local black woman who lived nearby. One early morning, she went to fetch water from a pond near her house, only to find that the pond had been severely damaged. Not far from the pond, she spotted a massive creature as large as a house moving across the ground. Terrified, she ran to call her neighbors, but by the time they arrived, the creature was gone. All that remained were tracks leading to a nearby cliff. It seemed the creature had escaped into deep water from that point. Another eyewitness was a young man walking along a road. Suddenly, he saw a giant pine tree collapse for no apparent reason. There was no wind, no lumberjacks, and no visible cause for the fall. Curious, he approached the fallen tree to investigate. As he neared it, he felt the ground shaking beneath his feet. Following the vibrations, he soon discovered the source. A monstrous black worm-like creature, 25 meters long, with 2 antennae protruding from its head. Labino also mentioned another intriguing case. In 1849, while traveling in Arepe, Uruguay, he heard reports that a dead Minhoco had been found a few miles away. The creature was said to have been crushed by rocks, trapping it and ultimately leading to its death. Locals described its skin as thick and rough, like pine tree bark, covered in scales similar to a pufferfish. On March 10, 1866, the Nicaraguan Gazette published a letter from Paulino Montenegro to a local news agency. In his letter, Montenegro recounted an event that took place while he was traveling to Concordia, Mexico. Along the way, he heard rumors of a giant serpent lurking in La Cusilla, a nearby area. He and several friends rushed to the scene, where they found tracks left behind by the mysterious creature. Interestingly, 5 years earlier, in 1861, a farmer had discovered a newly flattened piece of land at the base of a mountain. Believing the land to be suitable for farming, he planted fruit trees on it. However, in 1863, the ground suddenly collapsed, revealing a massive rock beneath the surface. No one could explain what had caused the collapse, as there were no underground water channels in the area. Over time, trees in the surrounding area began to shift and loosen. Enormous oak trees were toppled, and boulders were thrown out of the ground. By December, efforts were made to block the roads between Jicalisco and North San Rafael, but the ground remained filled with deep cracks and fissures. When Montenegro arrived at the scene, 3 days had already passed since the last recorded trench appeared. 2 separate tracks had formed. Locals claimed to have witnessed a massive beast knocking down an oak tree. However, the falling tree startled the creature, causing it to flee immediately. One set of tracks led to a nearby pond, while the larger set of tracks cut through 4 feet of solid rock before finally reaching the water. Montenegro personally examined the displaced tree roots, as well as boulders weighing over 1.5 tons that had been pushed aside. From the imprints left in the soil, he concluded that the creature had scales. Based on the evidence, he estimated that this unknown creature could have been 40 feet long, 10 feet tall, and 5 feet wide. Locals referred to this mysterious beast as culebra, the Spanish word for serpent. There are countless other reported sightings of the Minhoco, but most come from obscure newspapers or academic papers. For folklorists, one pressing question remains: does this legendary creature truly exist? If the Minhoco is merely a vivid personification of natural phenomena, such as earthquakes or other geological disturbances, then it represents a form of nature worship deeply tied to its region. On May 9, 1887, the renowned British biologist Charles Darwin sent a letter to Dr. Muller, raising a thought-provoking question. Could the so-called underground giant beast actually be the result of imagination, triggered by the discovery of large fossilized animal bones embedded in rocks? Darwin pointed out a similar case along the Paraná River, where Highland natives once mistook a set of ancient bones for the remains of a burrowing animal, similar to a rabbit or rodent. Of course, this theory has been challenged by cryptozoologists in modern times, as it fails to account for the numerous eyewitness reports of the creature. In an article published in the North American Fortean Biology Review, American cryptozoologist Chad Arment stated, "This creature is simply too elusive. Perhaps it has already gone extinct, or maybe it never existed at all." However, if the Minhoco was purely fictional, created to explain unexplained natural events, then why has it stopped appearing in modern times? And what, if anything, has replaced the Minhoco phenomenon today? Speculation about the Minhoco varies widely within cryptozoology circles. The first scientist to document the Minhoco, French naturalist Auguste Saint-Hilaire, stated in his article that several fishermen assured him, although the Minhoco is said to have a round, worm-like body, it is in fact a real fish. Dr. Saint-Hilaire proposed that the creature could be a species of large South American lungfish, which would be the most reasonable explanation. Lungfish have elongated bodies, and their eyes could easily be mistaken for nostrils if covered in mud or debris. Additionally, the antennae-like features described in Minhoco reports could be an exaggeration of the lungfish's gill structures. Moreover, lungfish bury themselves in mud and enter a state of suspended animation, which could explain the creature's reported burrowing behavior. However, the biggest flaw in this theory is that lungfish do not have the size or strength to drag large animals into the water. While some primitive species of lungfish do possess scaly features, there has never been a documented specimen large enough to match the Minhoco's legendary proportions. In 1891, the German physicist Emil Bader published a book titled Discussions in Natural Science, where he speculated, if this creature has no limbs, then it must crawl like a worm. Its scaly body could provide the necessary traction to move through underground tunnels. If the reports of a pig-like snout and antennae are accurate, it may resemble certain species of burrowing reptiles. Cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans, often called the father of cryptozoology, believed that Bader was likely referring to the legendary Tatzelwurm, a mythical burrowing reptile from European folklore. However, Heuvelmans favored another theory, that the Minhoco could be a surviving prehistoric species, possibly related to the glyptodonts. Could the Minhoco be a surviving glyptodont? Glyptodonts were massive, armadillo-like mammals that roamed South America during the Cenozoic era. According to fossil records, this species first appeared around 38 million years ago during the late Eocene and became extinct approximately 11,000 years ago during the early Holocene. Glyptodonts were the closest relatives of modern armadillos, but they were much larger and had turtle-like armored shells made up of hundreds of bony plates. The largest known glyptodont species, Doedicurus, grew up to 12 feet in length and stood around 4 feet 11 inches tall. Fossils of this species have been found in several South American countries, including Brazil and Uruguay. In 1858, Professor Bernard Heuvelmans wrote in his book, The Art of Searching for Unknown Animals, that the Minhocão possessed immense strength, claws, and armor. Furthermore, its massive size meant that the tunnels it dug could cause significant ground subsidence. Heuvelmans speculated that glyptodonts might have been semi-aquatic, moving through narrow streams and riverbeds. In larger bodies of water, despite their heavy armor, they might have inflated their intestines with air to float. However, the problem with this theory is that there is no definitive evidence proving glyptodonts were amphibious. In fact, even their ability to dig tunnels remains an open question. Within paleontology, there is no consensus on the ecological behavior of these creatures. Cryptozoologist Dr. Carl Schuker also disagrees with the glyptodont theory. Instead, he proposes that the Minhocão could be a giant amphibian caecilian, a species also known as naked blind snakes. Caecilians are limbless amphibians with small or completely absent eyes, a cylindrical body, and a bullet-shaped head. Currently, over 200 species of caecilians are known to exist, primarily in South America, Africa, and tropical Asia. Larger species, such as the Thompson's caecilian from Colombia, can grow up to 5 feet in length, giving them a snake-like appearance. Dr. Schuker argues that caecilians are widespread in South America and strongly resemble earthworms in both appearance and movement. Unlike earthworms, however, caecilians have clearly visible mouths, which matches descriptions of the Minhocão. Some species also have sensory tentacles on their heads, which move in a way that could be mistaken for antennae or ears. Additionally, although not easily noticeable, caecilians do have scales, which could resemble the armor-like plating of the Minhocão. If a giant variant of this species existed, it might look similar to a pufferfish with sharp spines. Moreover, caecilians attack their prey by targeting the abdomen, a behavior consistent with the Minhocão's reported attacks on animals. Over time, this hypothesis gained traction, even convincing Professor Heuvelmans to abandon the glyptodont theory in favor of it. Having reviewed all the available information on the Minhocão, I personally believe there is a possibility that it once existed. Looking at it from a reverse reasoning perspective, all sightings and traces of the Minhocão were reported in the 19th century. However, due to the passage of time, no photographic or video evidence remains. As Professor Chad Arment once said, if the Minhocão was merely a legend, why did it disappear? And if it truly existed, what caused its extinction? Unlike religious myths or historical cultural beliefs, the Minhocão was never tied to faith or national identity. Additionally, in the 19th century, South America was plagued by constant wars, making the idea that it was a tourism promotion hoax unrealistic. Most importantly, sightings continued well into the Cold War era, which suggests that some large species may have vanished due to warfare, hunting, or habitat destruction at that time. Take the glyptodont as an example. Although the scientific community widely believes that glyptodonts were among the megafauna wiped out during the late Pleistocene extinction, new research suggests that hunting by early humans might have been a key factor in their extinction. At the end of the day, this brings us back to a familiar message. We must all do our part to protect wildlife and preserve the natural environment we rely on. For those who enjoy hunting, poaching, or even torturing animals, I have only one thing to say: karma will find its way to you. As for the real nature of the Minhocão, I will leave the question open to you, the audience. Having examined the arguments from various scholars, I will refrain from making a final judgment. As always, I will end with this thought. The unknown will always be greater than the known. That is the true charm of unidentified mysterious animals. That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching.